The moment those words escaped Tom Bower's mouth, the illusion didn't just crack, it detonated, sending shockwaves straight through Meghan Markle's carefully polished fairy tale, exposing whispers so explosive they threatened to rewrite everything the world thought it knew about the Duchess who claimed she never chased the crown, yet somehow ended up wearing its most controversial shadow. And this wasn't some faceless troll or tabloid rumor factory tossing stones from the dark. This was Tom Bower, the man whose entire reputation was built on dragging secrets into the daylight and daring anyone to prove him wrong. And suddenly, Meghan wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. She wasn't guiding the story. She was trapped inside it.
So many suggestions. Was she operating as a yacht girl? How was she making her money? How was she traveling around the world?
During the explosive segment, Bower didn't hold back. He directly referenced Meghan's alleged yacht girl reputation.
Called Yacht Girl. She says this has been in her draft since 2018. Which means that this is a...
Tom Bower didn't just speak, he dropped a bomb so brutal, so precise, it felt less like gossip and more like an execution of a myth millions had believed in. He called her a 54-year-old granny, a phrase dripping with mockery. But that insult wasn't even the real damage. No, the real devastation came from what followed. Because behind that insult lurked allegations that clawed into Meghan's past, ripping open chapters she'd spent years burying beneath humanitarian speeches, royal weddings, and carefully staged interviews. The most terrifying part wasn't the claims themselves, it was the silence from Meghan's camp. The woman who once dismantled entire media narratives with a single interview suddenly had nothing to say. No rebuttal, no denial loud enough to crush the noise, just quiet. And in the world of scandal, silence isn't peace, it's suspicion. And then came the whispers about yachts, not casual sailing trips, not innocent vacations with friends, but exclusive yacht parties, the kind where billionaires don't just relax, they recruit. Where connections aren't made, they're traded. Where futures are negotiated behind champagne glasses and moonlit decks. According to Bower, Meghan wasn't just attending these events for leisure. She was positioning herself, calculating, watching, waiting.
Door meeting, William drew a line, rejecting outdated traditions and declaring the royal system.
This wasn't a girl chasing dreams. This was someone chasing access. Imagine it, the ocean stretching endlessly, laughter echoing under foreign stars, men whose names never appear in headlines, but whose influence shapes entire industries standing within arm's reach. Meghan wasn't just floating on water, she was floating on opportunity. Every handshake was a potential ladder rung. Every introduction was a doorway. And suddenly, her rise didn't look accidental anymore. It looked engineered. The timeline became impossible to ignore. Her transformation from a struggling actress into someone orbiting royal bloodlines didn't feel like coincidence, it felt like trajectory. A carefully drawn line from obscurity to global fame, one connection at a time. And then another name entered the storm, Kirby Summers.
Prince Harry seemingly has his latest social media meltdown as he attempts and I think fails to encourage.
Summers had been watching quietly for years, piecing together fragments like a detective obsessed with a puzzle nobody else wanted to solve. She wasn't screaming accusations, she was mapping patterns, dates, locations, associations, and the more she mapped, the clearer the picture became. Meghan wasn't drifting randomly through elite circles, she was navigating them. Precision, purpose, strategy, and the internet noticed. Social media didn't just react, it erupted. Old photos resurfaced like ghosts. Innocent boat snapshots suddenly looked sinister. Every smile was re-examined, every glance dissected. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Memes didn't just mock, they accused. Because once people believe you climbed using charm instead of merit, they don't just question your past, they question everything. Her humanitarian persona, her speeches about equality, her carefully rehearsed vulnerability. Was it compassion or performance? Was it sincerity or survival? The questions multiplied faster than answers could suppress them. And then came the revelation that hit even deeper. Not her past, but her intentions. According to Bower's research, Harry wasn't the original destination. He was the detour. The claim spread like poison through public perception. Meghan allegedly had her eyes on Prince William first, the future king, the ultimate symbol of power, the crown itself. And when that path closed, when William remained unreachable, she pivoted to Harry, not the heir, the spare. And suddenly, Harry's greatest insecurity, being second, became the center of the most humiliating rumor of his life. Because imagine Imagine loving someone with your entire soul only for the world to believe you were their backup plan. The internet didn't show mercy. They never do. Memes painted Harry as a consolation prize, a trophy no one wanted until the real one wasn't available. The prince who gave up everything, his home, his title, his family, now stood accused of being someone's plan B. It wasn't just Meghan's image unraveling, it was their love story. And the contradictions didn't stop there. Remember Oprah, that interview, that carefully orchestrated moment where Meghan insisted she knew nothing about the royal family before meeting Harry. She said she didn't Google him, didn't research him, didn't prepare. She portrayed herself as innocent, naive, unaware. But Bauer's claims painted a different version entirely. Not naive, prepared, not unaware, informed, not accidental. Intentional. He alleged Meghan studied Harry, his trauma, his grief over Princess Diana, his emotional wounds, his lifelong struggle with being second to William. She understood his vulnerabilities, understood his loneliness, understood exactly what he needed, and she became it. The comfort, the escape, the answer, not by chance, by design. She mirrored his passions, matched his humanitarian interests, positioned herself as someone who understood his pain like no one else ever could. It was brilliant and terrifying, because it suggested something deeper than romance. It suggested strategy. Suddenly, their whirlwind love story didn't look spontaneous. It looked orchestrated. Every smile, every touch, every public moment carried new weight. Was it love or was it alignment? And while the public wrestled with these revelations, Hollywood began whispering too. Doors that once opened easily started closing quietly. Meetings postponed indefinitely. Projects stalled without explanation. Executives who once saw Meghan as a global brand suddenly saw risk, because Hollywood doesn't fear scandal. It fears unpredictability. And Meghan had become unpredictable, not because of what was proven, but because of what was possible. Because perception in Hollywood is currency. And once perception shifts, the damage doesn't need confirmation. Suspicion alone is enough. Her dream of becoming a media powerhouse, producer, influencer, cultural icon now faced an enemy she couldn't control: doubt. And doubt spreads faster than truth. Her carefully crafted identity, activist, humanitarian Martin Princess began colliding with an entirely different narrative, one of ambition, calculation, social climbing. And once those two images collide, only one survives. The world wasn't watching a fairy tale anymore. They were watching an unraveling. And Tom Bauer, he wasn't finished, because according to whispers growing louder each day, the yacht allegations weren't the full story. They were the opening act. The most terrifying part wasn't what Tom Bauer had already exposed, it was what he hadn't said yet. Because while the world was still reeling from yacht whispers, backup prince humiliation, and psychological strategy allegations, the biographer himself was sitting quietly, watching the chaos unfold like a man who knew the worst secrets hadn't even surfaced yet. And Meghan could feel it, that creeping sensation that this wasn't the storm, it was just the thunder before lightning. Behind closed doors, something strange began happening in Hollywood. Calls stopped being returned. Invitations slowed. The energy shifted in a way nobody could openly explain, but everyone could feel. Because Hollywood isn't a place that punishes people for scandal. It punishes people when scandal threatens profitability. And suddenly, Meghan wasn't just controversial, she was unpredictable. Executives who once leaned forward eagerly during meetings now leaned back cautiously. Assistants who once squeezed her into impossible schedules now claimed there were conflicts. Projects that had been whispered about with excitement suddenly went silent, like conversations that never happened. And nobody officially rejected her. That would have been easier. Instead, she was frozen out quietly, the cruelest kind of exile. Because in Hollywood, silence isn't neutral, it's rejection. The yacht allegations had done something deeper than embarrass her. They'd reshaped perception, and perception is everything. Once powerful decision makers start wondering whether someone built their image authentically or strategically, trust evaporates. And without trust, there is no empire. But the destruction wasn't confined to boardrooms. It spread online like wildfire. Social media didn't just react, it feasted. Memes multiplied at a speed impossible to contain. Harry's face appeared everywhere, edited onto images of second-place medals, consolation trophies, forgotten prizes. The prince, who once symbolized rebellion, now symbolized ridicule. The man who left his entire world behind for love was now being mocked as someone who wasn't even the first choice. Hashtags surged globally. Millions of strangers became investigators overnight, dissecting every photograph, every interview, every micro expression Meghan Meghan had ever displayed. Old clips resurfaced with chilling new interpretations. Her smiles were analyzed, her pauses scrutinized, her words re-examined for hidden calculation. Even moments that once looked tender now look strategic. And once doubt enters the public imagination, it doesn't leave quietly. It grows, it mutates, it becomes belief. Even her most loyal defenders, those who once fought relentlessly on her behalf, began losing confidence. Their defenses sounded less certain, less aggressive, because Bauer's claims weren't vague accusations. They were detailed, specific, structured, and specificity makes denial harder. The fairy tale wasn't just cracking anymore, it was collapsing. And at the center of it all stood Harry, a man who had spent his entire life being second to William, second to the throne, second in expectation, second in importance, and now possibly second in love. That realization cut deeper than any public insult ever could, because Harry didn't just give Meghan his heart, he gave her everything. His country, his identity, his family, his role. He walked away from centuries of tradition to build a life with her. He burned bridges he could never rebuild. And now the world was laughing at him for it, not because of what was proven, but because of what people believed might be true. That belief became its own reality. And while Harry faced humiliation, Meghan faced something worse: loss of control. Because control had always been her greatest weapon. She controlled interviews, controlled appearances, controlled timing, controlled messaging. Every step of her transformation from actress to duchess to global influencer had been carefully managed. But Tom Bauer operated outside her reach. He didn't need her approval. He didn't need access. He didn't need cooperation. He only needed sources, and sources were everywhere. Former staff members who'd quietly disappeared, old acquaintances who'd watched her climb, industry insiders who'd seen things they never spoke about publicly, people who had nothing to gain except truth. And Bauer was listening to all of them, patiently, quietly, building something bigger. Rumors began swirling about his next book. Not speculation, confirmation. He was preparing another release, another wave, another detonation. And according to those closest to the situation, what he'd already revealed was only the beginning. The yacht stories weren't the climax. They were the trailer. And that realization created a trap Meghan couldn't escape. If she spoke publicly, she risked giving him new material to analyze. Every denial could be dismantled. Every explanation could be challenged. Every defense could open new questions. But if she stayed silent, his version would dominate uncontested. Either choice strengthened him, either choice weakened her. It was a perfect strategic prison. Because the very tactics she'd relied on for years, PR management, media alliances, carefully timed interviews, were useless against someone who didn't rely on publicity to operate. He relied on evidence. And evidence doesn't fear reputation. It destroys it. Meanwhile, public perception continued shifting at terrifying speed. Just a few years ago, Meghan and Harry were seen as revolutionary figures, symbols of independence, courage, modern royalty. They were admired, celebrated, protected. Now they were becoming something else entirely, a cautionary tale, a story whispered not with admiration but with suspicion. Hollywood saw risk, the public saw strategy, the internet saw weakness, and weakness invites attack. Their carefully constructed brand, the humanitarian couple fighting injustice, was being replaced by a darker narrative, one of ambition disguised as innocence, strategy disguised as love, calculation disguised as destiny. The transformation was brutal, and it was happening in real time. The most devastating part wasn't losing approval, it was losing credibility. Because once credibility disappears, nothing you say can restore it instantly. Every future action gets filtered through suspicion. Every statement gets questioned. Every motive gets doubted. And Meghan's entire empire had been built on credibility. Without it, everything else became fragile. The terrifying truth was simple. Tom Bauer didn't need to destroy Meghan. He only needed to make the world question her. Because once the world starts questioning, it finishes the job itself. And that's exactly what was happening. The fairy tale wasn't ending with a dramatic explosion. It was ending with something quieter, slower, more permanent. Erosion, reputation eroding, trust eroding, control eroding. And as the whispers grew louder, one question echoed everywhere. From palace halls to Hollywood offices to millions of phones glowing in dark rooms across the world. Was Meghan Markle the victim of ruthless exposure or the architect of her own unraveling? Because if Tom Bauer's next revelations were even more devastating than the last, then this wasn't the end of the Sussex collapse. It was only the beginning. And this time, there would be no rewriting the story.